This podcast is an invitation to feel and experience the souls of famous old Hollywood homes and to have an in-depth journey to the areas where they're located through interviews with longtime residents. Either you're a fan of old Hollywood in Los Angeles, planning to have a vacation, or, an even bigger step, considering a certain area for your future home. This is your opportunity to receive valuable information and insightful advice you won't find anywhere else.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast. Are you in the mood for California? Today we'll feel and experience the vibrant energy of Los Angeles and how it intertwines with the journey from creative highs to personal healing, featuring an interview with incredible Ryan Dusick.
I think Saturday Night Live in particular, it's live TV, you're playing in front of millions of people and you have one shot. It's just live, you know? And so you either are going to sink or swim, and I'm going in, like, if it goes well, like, this could change your life. And if you crash and burn, it could be the end.
Yes.
So it went well. And the next day or the next week, we looked at the record sales, like, quadrupled. And it was just the moment when we recognized, okay, all this hard work we've been doing for a decade is paying off. And it's the moment where I think it's clear to say that the country and the world is going to know the name Maroon 5.
Masha Korpacheva is a California-based realtor and a member of the National Association of Realtors in Los Angeles. She's an advocate for selling and buying homes with soul and practicing mindfulness in real estate. With master's degrees in spiritual psychology and linguistics, Masha brings all of her skills to work with her clients. An intuit and empath, she has touched many lives with her outstanding ability to see beyond the visible and helping to come to better understanding of issues and their resolutions. An adventurous world traveler, from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania to exploring the Galapagos Islands, Masha has a particular passion for the City of Angels. Having landed in this paradise and adopted it as her home, she's been sharing old Hollywood stories since 2007. In the mood for California, feel the soul of old Hollywood.
And now, are you ready to explore how the vibrant energy of Los Angeles intertwines with the journey from creative highs to personal healing? In the sprawling city of Los Angeles, where the sky seems to stretch endlessly, creativity buzzes in every corner. It's a place where dreams either soar or crash, where the line between fame and obscurity can shift in the blink of an eye. For musicians, the journey to success in this city often becomes a story of contrasts, where the vibrant energy of LA intertwines with both moments of creative highs and the deep, sometimes painful, search for personal healing. Take the story of a band like The Doors, whose journey is as much about Los Angeles as it is about their music. In 1965, four young men, Jim Morrison, Raymond Zarek, Robbie Krieger, and John Densmore, came together in Venice Beach, a place where free spirits roamed and the vibe was electric with the promise of something more. The Doors embodied this chaotic yet beautiful energy. Their songs captured the raw edge of LA's cultural landscape, dark, mysterious, and filled with longing. Morrison, the band's charismatic frontman, quickly became a symbol of rock and roll excess. His journey with fame in Los Angeles was intense. The city both made him and unmade him. The clubs on the Sunset Strip, the Whiskey A Go-Go, the Roxy, became his playground, but also his battleground. Night after night, under the flashing lights, Morrison would belt out lyrics that spoke to the soul of Los Angeles. Lyrics that made people feel both alive and on the verge of breaking. From behind the allure of celebrity, the price he paid was steep. The fame, the drugs, the endless pressure, it all fed into a deep personal conflict. LA's intensity brought out the best in his creativity, but also accelerated his struggles. Then there is the story of Fleetwood Mac, who found themselves caught in the LA music scene's tangled web in the 1970s. The band, already popular in the UK, moved to LA to record what would become one of the best-selling albums of all time, Rumors. The glitz and glamour of Los Angeles drew them in, but so did the city's darker side. In the midst of personal breakups, betrayals, and intense pressure, Fleetwood Mac created music that reflected their personal pain. The sun-drenched beaches and star-studded parties were juxtaposed with nights filled with arguments, heartache, and addiction. Yet, out of that emotional wreckage came songs like Go Your Own Way and Dreams, hits that continue to resonate today. Los Angeles is a city that mirrors the experiences of those who come seeking fame. It provides the inspiration, the chance to be seen, heard, and recognized, but it also tests your spirit. For many musicians, LA's cultural energy is intoxicating. The possibility of stardom feels just within reach as you pass through bustling streets lined with towering palm trees and iconic landmarks. But as the stories of Jim Morrison and Fleetwood Mac remind us, the road to fame often involves an inner journey, a reckoning with oneself. For musicians, Los Angeles offers a paradox. The city thrives on reinvention and the promise of transformation, yet it can also be unforgiving. The endless pursuit of celebrity, the pressure to create something new and bigger, the temptations of excess, all these things can easily derail even the most talented. The price of fame in LA is often paid in sleepless nights, fractured relationships, and the relentless struggle for balance. But Los Angeles also offers healing for those willing to find it. Musicians who come to LA often experience both creative highs and personal lows, but those who navigate the storm and come out on the other side find something precious, the ability to turn their pain into art. Los Angeles, for all its sparkle, allows for a kind of vulnerability. It's a place where you can be raw, exposed, and broken, and still rise. For musicians like Jim Morrison, fame was both a gift and a curse. For Fleetwood Mac, the city's intensity shaped their greatest work while nearly tearing them apart. But in both cases, LA's energy, its ability to uplift and to challenge, was a constant presence. Today, Los Angeles still pulls in artists with that same magnetic force. Its vibrant energy continues to fuel creativity, but it also whispers a warning. Fame has a price. For those who come seeking the spotlight, they must also be ready to face the shadows that come with it. Yet, in that tension, in the highs and the lows, Los Angeles reveals its true nature, a city where art is born from both inspiration and healing, where the journey to stardom is as much about finding yourself as it is about reaching the top. And here we are. Welcome to Los Angeles. I'm so thrilled to have Ryan Dusick here with me. Ryan Dusick is a registered therapist, coach, speaker, founding drummer of Maroon 5, author of the book Harder to Breathe, a memoir of making Maroon 5, losing it all, and finding recovery, and host of the Harder to Breathe podcast. His life has been a winding road from aspiring pop star with anxiety to heartbroken alcoholic to thriving mental health survivor and messenger of hope in recovery. Founding the group Kara's Flowers in 1994 with best friends Adam Levine, Jesse Carmichael, and Mickey Madden, Ryan and his bandmates worked tirelessly for a decade before the group changed its name to Maroon 5 and finally recorded its first multi-platinum album songs about Jane. Multiple hit songs, 2 Grammy Awards, and 20 million albums sold later. Ryan found himself suffering and without direction when his career as a performer came to an end, just as it was taking off. After years of struggling with physical and mental health challenges, Ryan finally overcame in 2016 when he began his journey of recovery, culminating in a new life path full of meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. While adding a master's degree in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University to his bachelor's degree in English from UCLA, he decided it was time to write his story in hopes of helping others who might see themselves in his personal struggles. Now, working as a mental health professional and advocate, Ryan is spreading the message that recovery is possible and astounding things can come with it. Ryan Dusick will take us along on his journey as he shares his life story, navigating the highs of fame with Maroon 5 and the personal challenges of mental health and healing, all shaped by the vibrant energy of Los Angeles. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well today, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for finding the time in your busy schedule to have this conversation with me today.
Yeah, well, Los Angeles is a city that I have lived in my entire life and still love to this day. So it was an interesting idea to talk about my experience in this great city.
Wonderful. I love that. So, could you please share what does it feel like for you to live in Los Angeles? How would you describe the energy and vibe of the city through your eyes? Or maybe ears, even.
Well, for me, I hear a lot of the stories that people tell about coming to LA, and they're either excited about the entertainment business and Hollywood. A lot of people talk about being disappointed that it's not like what it is on TV or in the movies. But I just overall hear a lot about sort of what the energy is of Hollywood and that whole element of the city. And to be honest, although I was surrounded by those elements my whole life, I don't really think of that first and foremost when I think of LA, because I wasn't a transplant. I was an Angelino. I was born here, and I just had the experience of the neighborhoods and the small kind of communities within the larger, sprawling city. So I think of the town that I grew up in, Carthay Circle, which is kind of a quaint middle class neighborhood that was very much a community, and living in Los Feliz, which is also an old part of LA that has a smaller feel to it, a lot of old homes and beautiful architecture. And
Yes.
so for me, I don't think first and foremost about the industry and the nightclubs and all that stuff. I think of towns and families and communities.
Interesting. And as someone who grew up here, how do you feel LA might have shaped your journey, both musically and personally?
Well, I think, LA is a very diverse city, and I come from a diverse background. My mom is from Mexico. My dad is Jewish, and his family's from Eastern Europe a couple generations back. So I kind of see myself as a product of the melting pot of Southern California in a lot of ways, both just familially and also just the energy and the attitudes of diverse groups of people of different ethnic backgrounds and racial backgrounds and a lot of different languages. I've lived all over the city, and you've got Koreatown, and you've got Little Armenia and Thai Town, and Little Tokyo. There's just so many different areas where you can go into and discover a lot of different communities with different backgrounds. So for me, I think that would had a huge effect on me, both in terms of just the way that I see the world, being a little bit more diverse and worldly, but also musically. I became a musician, and there's just a lot of different styles of music that influenced me. And my mom's background with Latin music, and my dad's background growing up in LA. His sister was a Broadway singer, went to New York when she was a teenager, and it's just I'm listening to popular music here. I mean, there was dance music and hip hop music and rock music. So I just feel like that more than anything, going to a public elementary school, going to a public university at UCLA, just a really great intersection of a lot of different kinds of people and influences.
Yes, yes. Well, it does sound like you have absolutely imbibed everything that Los Angeles has to offer as a melting pot. This is so incredible.
Yeah, I've enjoyed that, and that's been the thing I hold dearest to me, and it's part of my self identity. I think I'm a mutt by nature. I'm a combination,
Yes, yes. Wow. And that's the best kind, that's when I think when you grow up in such a diverse city, and as you mentioned, it makes you feel very worldly because you have been exposed to so many different cultures and types of music and types of food, probably as well.
Right.
It's just that you see the world in a miniature in a way, and then you can also pick and different little things there and there, and then create your own style as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I think we discovered as a band in Maroon 5, was that you borrow from a lot of different influences. You emulate your heroes, but you combine them in a way that hopefully is unique to you, because there's nothing that's truly original. We're always just taking things from things that came before us. And I think whether that's customs or that's musical styles or food, as you say, I'm sure the greatest chefs in the world were ones who came from very strong traditions and then combined them in a way that was new and different and unique. So I always see that as a benefit.
Yes, yes, very true. Because I think no matter how many people live on the earth, there is not one single person with the same way of perceiving the world. We
Right.
all see things differently, we taste them differently, we hear them differently, and it is your perception of what comes towards you that you sort of digest, and then you create something of your own, and that's why it's so unique.
Absolutely.
So could you please tell me a little bit about your work as a founding drummer of Maroon 5? And that's the band that defined a whole generation. What was the moment when you realized that the band had made it, and how did it impact you?
Well, there's a lot of specific moments I could point to. The moment that probably stands out to me most, it was when we played Saturday Night Live for the first time. I mean, I only played once, but the band I think played again years later. That's just, Saturday Night Live is the kind of thing that we grew up watching that show, and you didn't see bands on that show that weren't either really big or just breaking through and becoming really big, and in the kind of way that you saw it and you were like, okay, this is the next big thing. And so whereas even playing, I think, on The Tonight Show or David Letterman's show or some of the other late night shows, whereas that was a big deal in and of itself, I think Saturday Night Live in particular, it's live TV, you're playing in front of millions of people, and you have one shot. It's just live, you know? And so you either are going to sink or swim, and I'm going in, like, if it goes well, like, this could change your life. And if you crash and burn, it could be the end.
Yes.
So it went well. And the next day or the next week, we looked at the record sales, like, quadrupled. And it was just the moment when we recognized, okay, all this hard work we've been doing for a decade is paying off. And it's the moment where I think it's clear to say that the country and the world is going to know the name Maroon 5.
Yes, yes. So how did you feel?
I was terrified going into it. It was a lot of anxiety, and it's a weird thing performing on that show because there's a lot of blocking throughout the day. You do a lot of rehearsals, and there's lighting, and there's cameras, and there's all the stuff, the makeup and everything, and you're just kind of sitting around a lot all day, and so the adrenaline is pumping, and you feel kind of worn out but anxious at the same time. So there was a lot of nerves going in, but then when we finished, we were elated. It just felt so good to have done that thing and to have done it well, and then to see it all coming to fruition. I think there was a combination of a lot of feelings, though, because it was both, like I said, a decade of work and a real sense of accomplishment. But then there was also, for me, the fear of what was ramping up for me, which was that I was feeling exhausted a lot of the time and feeling that we were just really getting started 2 years into touring at that point, because it was going from playing, local clubs, theaters, and then all of a sudden playing arenas and being a headliner, and just a little bit of dread in terms of how overwhelming that life was going to be.
Yes, yes. And what I hear is that there was a lot of pressure, and somehow you managed to handle this pressure. And probably, there were some moments when you had to find balance between the success and your personal well-being. How were you able to do that?
Well, I was able to do that for some time, but in the end, I really wasn't able to do that, and that's why I ended up leaving the band. I suppose you could say leaving the band was the thing that was necessary for me to reestablish balance in my life. I think for a few years there, we were touring constantly, and I think that the way that I maintained balance in some ways was healthy, in other ways was not very healthy, because there wasn't, it's a lifestyle that's inherently unbalanced. I mean, there's no way you can really create real balance, at least not in those days, the way that we were touring. I think things have changed a little bit, and they're changing just both because there's more of an understanding of mental health and wellness than there was at that time. And I think also because the economy has changed, I think it's just not as sustainable to keep a band on the road that long, that intensely for that long. So you're just not seeing acts tour like that anymore. But I think for me, it was, I just tried to have fun. I think that I'm a homebody by nature, and being on all the time was difficult, and traveling all the time was difficult. Sleep was a problem. I just tried to lean into it a little bit, just think to myself, well, this may be the only time in my life that I have this opportunity, so make the most of it. So we were traveling the world at a certain point, and if we were in a new city, I would just take the time to get out by myself and go sightseeing and go for a walk and just kind of go soak up the local culture. And that was helpful for me for a long time, I think, just to feel like it wasn't becoming a rut,
Yes.
And at the same time, I think there were times when the best thing I could have done was just to rest, just to stay in my hotel room and get some more sleep and try to get as much rest as I could, because that was a commodity that was hard to come by. So if I could do it again, I probably would have prioritized just my physical health a little bit more.
Yeah, totally understand. Yes. And as someone who has faced both physical and mental health challenges, could you please share what helped you find the strength to keep going through those tough times?
Well, I faced a really, really tough time. I mean, the hardest time in my entire life was after I left the band. The time leading up to leaving the band, and then the time after leaving the band. And that was, I mean, it was devastating because, like I said, it was something that I'd worked for a decade of my life to achieve. And we were at that moment where we were having, massive success. And this life of fame and fortune that you'd only dream of was becoming a reality. And then I had to just step aside and walk away from that. So I was very depressed. I think really I understand now that I had to go through a grieving process, not just grieving the loss of the career, but really grieving the loss of my identity that was so wrapped up in being a member of that band.
Yes.
And so there were a lot of stages of grief. There was anger, and there was bargaining and depression. And I think that what I did for a long time there was I was self-medicating with alcohol and other things. And as a result, I was just either avoiding some of the problems that I had, and they were getting worse because I wasn't addressing them, or I was just, sitting in them and not able to move through them because I didn't have, really good coping skills. So my anxiety got worse over time. The alcoholism got worse over time. It wasn't until I kind of reached a spiritual bottom, not like a literal bottom where you end up on the street or in jail, the kind of things you hear about addicts going through before they get sober, if they do.
Yes.
Fortunately for me, it was really just a place of acceptance, of recognizing this wasn't going to get better unless I changed some things pretty drastically, and I didn't want to live that way anymore. So it was a moment of acceptance and surrender, and choosing a new path, which started with rehab for me, and then very quickly became new purpose for me because I discovered service as a way of getting out of my own sort of self-obsession that comes with anxiety and depression and substance abuse. And
Yes.
so that through service, I found, just a connection to living again, a connection to finding and creating meaning and purpose in my life. And everything I've done in the last 8 years since then has just been an outgrowth of that. It started with me volunteering at a recovery center in early recovery and being of service. I found a passion in that. I found that I had new talents or newly discovered talents in leading groups, in just, sharing my story and being of service in some of those ways. And it led to me going back to school to get a master's degree in clinical psychology, to become a therapist, which I am now. And that led to me in the course of that, writing my story in the form of a book, which I published. It's a book called Harder to Breathe, a memoir of making Maroon 5, losing it all and finding recovery. And in the course of promoting that book and doing a lot of interviews and things, I started to get asked to do speaking appearances. And so that became, all of these things became new sources of purpose and meaning in my life. And every day I'm discovering new ones. Just in the last few months, I started my own podcast, which is called Harder to Breathe as well. And I mention all those things not just to promote them, but to tell you that those are all part of my recovery and continue to be the things that I do for self-care, because having purpose, having connection to things that mean something to you and creating meaning is so important to staying on a path of mental wellness. We need the things that lift us up in our life and that give us a sense of purpose in our life more than anything. As an adjunct to that, the other things that I do, of course, is, I have to be more mindful of making sure I'm not burning myself out, because I do have a tendency to just work too hard or want to be constantly doing new things and moving forward. So it's about taking time and making sure I'm getting enough rest and taking care of myself holistically in mind, body, and spirit. And so, that's fostering my mental health through therapy, through meditation, through a lot of the techniques and coping skills I've gained in my own recovery and my own therapies. And then also in body, just making sure that I'm mindful of sleep and exercise and diet. And in spirit, when I say spirit, I'm not a deeply religious person, but I just mean, having a sense of connection to something larger than myself. And that's a relationship that we all have to define for ourselves. For some people it's God, for some people it's nature.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's other human beings. I can sometimes be a bit of an introvert and be a little isolated because I spend a lot of time alone doing solitary pursuits. So I have to make an effort to stay connected to people and to projects that get me out of my personal space.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a combination of a lot of things. I call it holistic because it's the whole being. It's mind, body, and spirit. It's every element. They're all interrelated and they're all important. And if you're not caring for all of them, then all of them suffer. So that's kind of, I do things, like for instance, I go and I play softball every Sunday morning, and that is not just exercise. It's also a way of tapping into my inner child. I feel like I'm 12 years old when I'm playing ball,
Yes.
and I'm connected to other people that have the same love of that sport. So it's all part of a healthy mind and a healthy body, and then it all goes together.
Wow, Ryan, that's incredible. It sounds like that your journey into recovery has been deeply transformative, and I would really want to acknowledge you for such incredible awareness that you had early on, and that you were gentle with yourself when going through the grieving process, and that you were able to find so many tools within yourself to support yourself. Because everything that you have just shared, it sounds, so easy and simple, but in reality, it is, hard work to do all of that.
Yeah.
And so I really want to acknowledge you for that. And also, looks like that transitioning from being a world famous musician to a mental health professional is just such an immense shift. So how did you actually discover that therapy and mental health work were your next calling?
Yeah, well, it is a lot of work, and I thank you for that acknowledgement. It was hard won, and it took a lot of years for me to get to that place. It seems like I made it pretty easy because I went into recovery and I was able to do all this stuff, but it was a decade of
Mm-hmm.
struggle to try to get a handle on this stuff before I finally kind of found really the humility to understand that my way of trying to control things was not working,
Yeah.
and to find that surrender to something that was going to be more effective and just allow me to get out of my own way. So I think it was an outgrowth of my own program of recovery. It was, and I did everything. I mean, I went to therapy, I went to 12-step meetings, I volunteered. I made a lot of sober friends who, having that accountability and that connection is really helpful. And I just started using a lot of my coping skills. And what happened was it gave me a passion for this stuff, which ignited a new interest in psychology and mental health as a field. And so I just kind of started having this thought, I'm doing this already just as a volunteer and I enjoy it so much.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should make a life out of this in some way. And I didn't know what that meant exactly at first, but I noticed that there were other people around me who had had a similar sort of journey where in midlife, like around age 40, they had gotten sober and gone back to school and become either a drug counselor or a therapist of some kind. And I thought, well, I do have a college degree. Thankfully, I was able to get a degree from UCLA when I was young. I didn't know if it would apply because it was an English degree. So I didn't know if I'd be able to get into a program for psychology.
Mm-hmm.
But thankfully, I was able to. I applied to Pepperdine and I got into the psychology program and clinical psychology. And it just became, like I said, a passion, so much so that it was just all consuming. I would when I started grad school, I would watch movies and TV shows different. I was just like psychoanalyzing everyone.
Well,
I knew that it was a passion because it became something that I brought into everything that I was doing. And I realized, in some ways these were talents and passions that were hard earned because I had to live through my own struggles and find my own recovery in order to learn them or to find that passion. But at the same time, I think they were things that I always had some interest in, and I just hadn't really been fully aware of it. Because I think since early on, whether it was music or film or books, literature, I was always drawn to stories, character stories, people and
mm-hmm.
what makes them tick. You looking at the character arc, like why people are the way they are and how they grow and change. A great story, starts with a problem and it ends with a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, or some kind of tragic flaw that leads to someone's downfall. But it's just looking at the people and the characters and the relationships as well. That's so important. That's another element of holistic health is our relationships. So I think that I've always been drawn to those stories, and I've always been drawn to stories that were kind of bittersweet,
Mm-hmm.
where my heroes in music early on when I was a teenager were the grunge rockers, the alternative rockers of the 90s, like Kurt Cobain of Nirvana and Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam and Chris Cornell of Soundgarden. And these guys were kind of tortured artists, very heavy and dark and introspective. But then there was also just like a glimmer of hope in the
Yes.
music. And it was so powerful and impactful. I was just always drawn to that intersection of something kind of dark and sad with something that was powerful or uplifting or hopeful, and in movie stories and in literature. So I think that when I found the passion for psychology, I recognized that was something I was always drawn to and always had an interest in.
Mm-hmm. You know what, the way you're describing it, it feels like your whole life has been a quest for self-discovery because
Yeah.
we it's like because when you're curious about other people's stories, when you psychoanalyze everything, it's something that comes from within. And usually, I think the biggest desire that drives you is actually to know yourself.
Yes. Yes. Very much so. Yeah. I think that as a kid, I was relatively innocent. And I don't know if I did a lot of introspection before I kind of hit adolescence, but it definitely hit me pretty hard at that age. And I went through that phase that I think most teenagers go through. It's a natural part of becoming self-aware and finding autonomy, separate from your parents. You go through a rebellious phase where you question everything that was an assumption up until that point, and kind of push off of all the things around you in a way that helps you, like a blind person in the dark, you have to feel the walls to know what the room is.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I was doing. I wasn't like overtly rebellious. I was always a good boy. I didn't get in a lot of trouble or with the law or anything like that. But I just, I went to like a very prestigious college prep high school, and I just started questioning, like, well, why do I have to do this all this way? Why do I have to go to a great college and become a doctor or a lawyer or a businessman? And questioning just all the things that were givens, and trying to find my own voice. And it became a process of introspection, looking inward at what do I really care about, what makes me who I am. And it was the music more than anything at that age that gave me that direction, because my heroes were people that seemed to be doing the same thing, and that seemed to be sort of iconoclastic, not really necessarily playing by the rules of what mainstream society tells you you're supposed to do. So I really related to that rebellious spirit. But it was all that. It was a quest to know myself. It was a quest to find my identity. And fortunately, for a long time, music gave me that identity. But it also was difficult when I lost that identity attached to the music, and I had to rediscover it. But what was ultimately a happy ending for me was to realize that identity and purpose is not something that is stagnant and static. It's not something that's given to you by God or the universe, and you only get one shot at it. It's something that you can continue to create and can continue to evolve in your life as you walk through different phases of your life. And me in my 40s is a very different me than me in my teens, so
Yes.
Meaning and purpose and identity is something different for me now. And I'm excited by the idea that when I'm 20 years from now, it could mean something very different as well, because I might have a different sense of what my purpose is then. That makes life interesting and makes it something that doesn't get boring. You always have the opportunity to continue to redefine what meaning is to you.
Yeah. So if you were able to go back and give advice to your younger self, what would be this one piece of advice that you would share with yourself?
I love this question because it's something I wish I could do, and I do try to impart this advice when I have young clients or people that come to me for advice that are either just getting into the music industry or just looking for sort of general life advice. I think the one sort of regret, and some people say, have no regrets. I don't believe in that. I think regrets are helpful for you to understand mistakes you've made and to try to, do better in the future. It's when regrets and guilt turn into shame that it becomes a problem. When you're carrying shame, that's when things can be really burdensome. But the thing I regret is just the defensiveness that I had as a young person, not being open to things that challenged me, made me feel like I was not good at it yet or knowledgeable enough at it, that I would kind of reject just because I didn't like that feeling. The advice really is to stay teachable and to be open to new challenges. That when something reveals itself to be foreign to you or to be uncomfortable, to look at that as an opportunity rather than a threat. I think that for the longest time, I looked at those things as threats to my sense of self, to my ego, to my pride. And so I would kind of shy away from it, because I was fortunate, and this was both a blessing and a curse, very blessed by a wonderful family and by being somebody who had a lot of success early in life. And, I think when you are blessed with some of those things, you think it's going to be that way all the time. And then when you're confronted with something that is not that way, it's like, what is this? This is foreign to me. I don't like this feeling. I'm not feeling like I'm up to this task. And so I just like, well, I'm not into that anyway. I don't really care about that. But really, that's where the good stuff is. When you come up against something that's a challenge like that, it's not a threat. It's not something that's going to take you down. It's something that's like opening a door for you. It's giving you an opportunity to grow and to become even more knowledgeable and to create new horizons for you. So that's what I try to do now. Like I said, in the last 8 years, everything I've done has been an outgrowth of things I am doing. It's just that a new door or window opens. I'm able to acknowledge that as an opportunity now, and I'm able to walk into the discomfort of that and see that as something that I look forward to and I want to learn from. Whereas when I was 19 years old, I would have seen it, not acknowledged it as an opportunity, and kind of shied away from it because I saw it as a threat. So it's a subtle difference, but I think it really makes a difference in terms of your growth and allowing yourself the opportunity to find new directions that could ultimately be even more fulfilling than the things that you're already succeeding at.
Yes, yes, very true. And what a beautiful piece of advice that is, staying teachable. So not being unwilling to open your heart or your mind to new things and try to push your boundaries, because anything that gets you out of your comfort zone are usually the things that you learn the most from, and you become a better person because of it.
Absolutely.
So beautiful. Ryan, thank you so much for this wonderful and inspiring conversation and sharing your journey and being vulnerable and truly, continuing to be of service, because I absolutely agree with you that this is the person of every human, to be of service to others. And thank you so much for continuing to do that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thank you again for inviting me onto your show.
Of course, of course. I hope it's not the last time.
Yeah, me too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much for tuning in to Feel and Experience Los Angeles with my special guest, Ryan Dusick. If you enjoy my podcast, In the Mood for California, please sign up for future episodes at your preferred platform, and please leave your feedback. I really appreciate your time and support. You can follow me on Instagram at In the Mood for California and check out my website www.inthemoodforcalifornia.com. Selling and buying homes with soul is not just my real estate strategy. It's an intuitive and holistic approach that embraces your values, aspirations, and conscious intentions. If you want to discover the power of mindfulness in your real estate journey with my compassionate guidance, I'm here for you. Next time, we'll venture all the way to Calabasas for an inspiring journey uncovering its rich history and unique charm. Cannot wait to explore it with you.
In the Mood for California. Feel the soul of Old Hollywood.